Today we are going to focus on one of my favorite things to draw, which is hair. Throughout this lesson, I'm going to show you how to draw straight hair, curly hair, and hair inside of a braid. I'm also going to tell you about the top mistakes that beginners make when drawing hair. But either way, throughout all of these steps, you're going to see a pattern with three really important things. Number one, creating sections. Number two, developing values. And number three, adding the texture. In that order is exactly how I always draw hair, no matter what kind of hair it is. I section it out, I add the values, and then I add the texture. So let's get started with just a straight piece of hair like this, okay? So I would rather work on some individual strands and then talk a little bit about how it would lay out on a face. So for an individual strand like this, I'm going to start out, like I said before, which is sectioning it off. So even though this is one chunk shape that kind of looks like this, it still has its own sections within it. So I can start to see these chunks and sections, okay? So I'm gonna just kind of start to use some line to show the movement. Your line should always move in the movement of your hair. So take a look at your photo reference and see where's the movement happening in the hair that you are drawing. So that's where these direction lines on this image are really showing us, right? Directional line marks. Okay, so second, you always want to start off with really light marks showing this motion. You don't want these marks to be too dark because we're going to start to develop values on top, okay? So lightly we're gonna block in where the shadows and the highlights will be. So we see the deepest shadows at like the start of the strand and at the bottom of this strand. So I'm gonna start to bring those in. There's a highlight here, so I'm gonna keep it somewhat blank for right now. Keep it open. You can see that I'm breaking my line. I'm not having a line go from top to bottom, A lot of times when we first start drawing hair, we do a little bit too much of these individualized strands. So you wanna see more so chunks of highlights and values and less of, you know, a strand drawing from top to bottom. So these are just our beginning marks. You're gonna see that we're gonna go over quite a bit our values throughout this. It's not like it's just a one-layer approach and we're done. It's a slow build-up. It's a gradual build-up. One thing is that as I start to build up more and more of these values, keeping a nice sharp pencil is going to be very helpful. So sometimes we get to this point and we want to, let's erase some of these marks. So at this point, maybe you want to blend it out a little bit. Okay, a couple things about blending. I don't really blend or use too many tools to blend other than my pencil, but if I were to choose one, it would not be my finger, okay? I think a lot of times when we first start drawing, it's our immediate first tool, so we want to go and blend out our pencil with our fingers, but our fingers have oil to them and they'll leave little marks around your page. So what you want to do is to use something like a tissue if you're going to do it, and you would do it at this part where we're building up some of these values. But see, the tissue is even going to soften this up a little bit. So the idea is to go back and forth between softening our values and darkening our values. So I'm going to go back in and start to increase the value and contrast in a couple of areas. And as I'm doing it, I'm also going to start to create a little bit more of that texture. So when we're creating texture, we are showing and breaking up the chunks a little bit more so that it looks more realistic. Hair will also, it doesn't always go in the same movement. Sometimes there's a little bit of an adjustment or a change, and we can see that right here as one kind of flips over. Maybe there's like a strand or two that come out. These like imperfections in your drawings are what's gonna make it look much more realistic. In real life, our hair moves around all the time, so creating that movement in your drawing is going to make it look more realistic. And I always move from dark towards the light. I don't start with the light and then try to make it darker, okay? So I'm moving from the dark sections towards the light. So you can see that the line is moving into that value and breaking apart. So I like to find a spot where I can start it and move it down. Now that means that I have to switch it up sometimes. I don't want it to all be dark in this section. We want some sections to be a little light, so I move it around. You can see that moving my paper around allows me to really get that much more nice stroke with my pencil that is not as controlled, it's more free. I can't sit there and control the line all the way and still get this wispiness, okay? So you gotta have some sort of like freedom with your pencil as well, and moving your paper around really helps with creating that. So now what you can do is even go back in, and some of the areas I feel like got a little bit too dark, so I'm gonna lighten them up. Maybe show a couple of more unique strands kind of popping out around the edges to make it look more natural. So the best kind of eraser would really be a kneaded eraser. I'm using a regular one right now, I'm cheating a little bit. But basically you want something much thinner. Kneaded erasers are nicer because you can make a really, really thin mark. So I'm gonna kind of go in the same kind of way that I built up the shadows. I go in with highlights as well. So I'm going in and just kind of breaking up a couple spots that maybe I felt got a little bit too dark. So that's a straight piece of hair that I would work with. If I look at a picture to figure out, you know, this would kind of be like one of these straight or wavy kind of hairs. So, or textures really. So really, when you're looking at a picture of someone's face, so let's say I just kind of like draw out a face to kind of go around to complement this one. This kind of hair would, and so look at a picture, see how the hair is, oh, let's do this. So look at a picture and see how the hair will kind of fall onto the face. And then basically you start to decide like, what are the chunks of hair? A lot of times I'll like draw right onto my image the way that the hair kind of falls into place. Where are the chunks at? So if I was drawing it on a real person, I would look at the way that those chunks kind of layer onto the face first, and then I would go in and start to bring in these values, working from the highlights to the shadows, okay? So I'll kind of work through that a little bit more.